So this is what I get for trying to upgrade my Tyranids and my Necrons. Focusing on space bugs and undead space robots, a buddy of mine is like, Fritz, new Space Marine Codex. I'm like, what do you mean new Space Marine Codex? We just got Apocalypse. And anytime there's a new Space Marine Codex, that means a new edition of 40K, well, usually isn't right around the corner. We get a new Space Marine Dex, a true Space Marine reboot right after a new edition happens. So I don't even know what you're talking about. And they're like, well, check out Warhammer Community. And besides, you've been spending too much time playing Blackstone Fortress, no spoilers in there. And lo and behold, a Space Marine Codex is going up on pre-order this weekend, really, really soon. And I find this intriguing in addition to some of the leaks on the various sites. And I have to say, it really has taken me by surprise. First of all, I won't say Space Marines are the strongest Codex right now, the strongest army out there. I would probably agree that they're maybe lower tier 1. Higher tier 2, but Space Marines have always been solid. Naturally, they get an influx of models because, let's be honest, Space Marines sell. And Space Marines are 40K. I'm willing to bet in this podcast that 3 things. I'm peering into the warp. I've consulted the Emperor's Tarot, and I'm willing to bet that you play Space Marines right now, your friend or your last opponent played Space Marines, or be honest. Justification for another army. You're thinking about playing Space Marines. That's the secret sauce. As much as I love Chaos, as much as I am a dedicated Eldar player, I love my Black Templars. I love the narrative of Space Marines. So it makes sense to put out a new book, especially with new models on there, but really before a new edition, and I'm not saying the new edition of 40K is around the corner, but we're getting towards the tail end, and we kind of need a refresh soon. And I don't have a problem, honestly, with the current edition of 40K. But new Space Marines. Now, here's the what if, and this is based on some of the minor leaks that I've seen and kind of some of the back and forth. I am convinced at some point, and it makes good sense from a model position, to retire Space Marines and go all Primaris. Simply because the Primaris Marines, well, first of all, we're going to get everybody to rebuy Space Marines, and we're going to get Mini Marines out of there. And second, this idea of updating the model ranges, forget about true scale Marines, the Primaris Marines, honestly, look at a Space Marine next to an Eldar Guardian on there. Space Marine's too small. Space Marine's supposed to be like 8 feet on there. And on that note, I always felt like, even though the orcs are kind of hunched over, orcs are a little bit too small. Games Day 2010, 2011, somewhere around there, when they had Space Marine for Xbox, they had the Khorne Berserker walking around, and in the full getup, the full gear and everything. And he was pretty impressive. But what was more impressive, even more so than the Squig Cake, was a true scale orc costume. And it wasn't a cosplay. Obviously, it was something promoting the game. It was this true scale orc with a choppa. And I thought to myself, I'm a pretty big guy. Those of you who've met me in real life, I've got some good height. I've got some good weight. In another distant time, I would have made, properly motivated by the correct commissar, I would have made a good frontline Imperial Guardsman. And I'm looking at this orc, and I'm like, this orc is huge. How can a guardsman face an orc? That's just insanity on there. So I always felt like the model-wise, the scale of the orcs was too small. So if Games Workshop was always going to update the Marines and bring in to show off the new technology of their molds, they needed to change Marines. They did this by changing the entire in-game universe, creating Primaris, but you could always play both. And I was always speculating that they're just looking to replace Marines. Now, could they really do that? At the time, this was years ago, no one could see, or maybe 2 years ago, I would say, look, they Sigmarized Warhammer Fantasy, destroyed that, got rid of it, blew Warhammer Fantasy out of the water. I don't know anybody that plays Warhammer Fantasy anymore. Even, X-Wing Miniatures 1.0 gets more play on there. Everything's Age of Sigmar. Now, I would say, looking back, that's a good thing. A lot of new stuff with Age of Sigmar. The terrain is fantastic. The gameplay is really fantastic. But the most impressive thing about Age of Sigmar, and this is the crossover to 40K, by literally blowing up the old world and freeing themselves from having to support those older model ranges. And you have to agree, even if you don't play Sigmar, even if you're like, just Fritz, I'm totally 40K, you have to admire the kits that they're putting out. You have to look at the model range for Age of Sigmar. The reboot on everything is absolutely amazing. So on the one hand, I see them wanting to do this with Space Marines and really bring them up in line with what they're currently capable of producing, getting everyone to rebuy Space Marines, getting new players into Space Marines, and kind of refreshing the 40K line overall. And that's the direction I saw Primaris going. But I figured it would be the new edition. Would that be too radical? Would that cause a ripple in the warp, a new Eldar god to kind of form there, a new Chaos god, simply because the outcry would be too great? I don't know. But now it seems like we're getting Primaris 2.0. A lot of the comments and a lot of the hints were reworked Primaris, new background, new history. There's going to be some new kits. There's going to be some new vehicles. There's going to be some new commanders, specifically focusing on that. You'll still be able to play your mini Marines, but I think this is a stopgap moving in that direction. Your thoughts on that? I mean, that's really interesting. Are they aggressively looking to replace Space Marines? And is this just a warm-up push to make that final jump in that new edition? And I don't know when the new edition is going to drop, but we're getting to the tail end. We're seeing signs, and the fact now that there's a new Marine Codex has to be a push to that 2.0, has to be pushed for there. I don't know how else to interpret that. How do you guys see that? How would you interpret that from that perspective?